In this video, the number one way to save money as a digital nomad. So the number one way that you can reduce your monthly expenses and have a low cost of living in Latin America as a digital nomad is paying attention to rent and accommodation. Rent is going to be your number one expense, your number one monthly expense in Latin America and in general as a traveler. The average American pays around 28 to 30% of their monthly income in rent in the USA. And in Latin America, I would argue in some cases it can be even a larger portion. I know there are months that I've spent $1,000 or $1,200 on a pretty nice Airbnb, and all my other monthly expenses combined probably cost less than $1,000. So in that sense, I was spending more than 50% of my monthly income on rent, or it was more than 50% of my budget. Obviously, in total, I wasn't spending all that much money. I was maybe spending $2,000, $2,500 a month, but rent was taking up the biggest portion of that because I was willing to pay extra for the convenience of Airbnb, and I was willing to pay extra for the convenience of being in a walkable neighborhood and being in what's called a Gringo Vortex zone, which is a place that has all the amenities. It's kind of the international neighborhood of the city. So in this video, I'll give you some ideas for how you can reduce your rent costs so that you can reduce your overall cost of living. So how much rent can you expect to pay in Latin America? Obviously, it's gonna vary wildly. You can rent an entire 3-bedroom house in Nicaragua for $150, $200 a month, easily. You know, you go somewhere like Mexico City, and to be in a half-decent area, it's going to cost a lot more than that. It might be on the order of, I don't know, $700, $800 a month to rent a 3-bedroom house. Now, I know everyone watching this video doesn't necessarily want a house, and you just want maybe a nice condo close to everything. And so I am generalizing, and we'll kind of talk about those two groups of people here. But rent is going to be your number one expense. And it can range from anywhere from $100 a month, $150 a month on the low end, up to well over $1,000, well over $2,000 a month for a really nice condo or a really nice Airbnb, or maybe renting a really nice, I don't know, beachfront full house. So there's no other monthly expense that's going to range from $150 to $1,500 and up, right? Food, $10 a day, $300 a month. Maybe you go out to dinner a lot and it's a little bit more than that. Uber is cheap. The gym is cheap. What else really is there? So it's all about controlling your rental costs and keeping that under budget. And I guess what I would say is you should be willing to pay a little bit extra to be in a nice neighborhood, to be in a walkable area, because if you have to pay an extra $200, $300 to be in a more ideal location and have a more ideal Airbnb, that's probably going to pay off in terms of taking less Ubers and maybe having grocery stores nearby and saving on some of those things. So I think it is worth paying a little bit extra to be in proximity to stuff, and it might even work out roughly equal in terms of taking less Ubers. But you want to make sure that you're in a good walkable area. As a digital nomad in Latin America or as a traveler, you're not going to have a car, you're not going to have a car expense, but some people might make the mistake of staying out in the middle of nowhere to save money. I don't recommend that either, because you'll end up having to take a whole bunch of Ubers to come into town, and you're just overall going to have a crappier experience, and it's just not worth it to save a couple $100. So you basically want to stay in the best neighborhood you can within your budget. Hopefully, people understand that. Like, I would rather have a crappy place in a good area than a good place in a crappy area. And by crappy, I don't mean dangerous. I just mean far away from things. So I would rather a crappy Airbnb that's, 2-3 blocks from the best bars and the best cafes and the best gym. I'd rather have a crappy place 2-3 blocks from the best gym than have an amazing place, glass, fancy, new building, but I'm 10 blocks away from the gym, and then I won't even want to go to the gym, or I got to Uber to the gym, right? So proximity is key, and I don't want you to sacrifice on proximity and walkability, but just sort of think of other ways you can save money. Maybe there's another area. Maybe you don't have to be in the number 1 gringo area. Maybe you can be in the number 2 or number 3 area that also has a gym nearby, also has a grocery store nearby, has some nice cafes, but it's just not the number 1 area. So for example, in say Mexico City, instead of being in Condesa, which might run you $2,500 a month on Airbnb, you could go down to Del Valle, or Narvarte as it's called, and you're still going to be in a walkable area. There's still going to be bars and gyms and all that stuff, but you're going to be paying a fraction of what you would pay in Condesa. I'll give you another example from, say, Medellin. So you could pay, the highest possible price to be in Provenza and to be in Poblado and to be, in the gringo zone. Or you could be sort of 10, 15 minutes outside of there near Envigado, but make sure you stay near a mall, stay near a gym, stay in a place that you have some amenities and you're not just in the middle of nowhere, in suburban middle of nowhere. Another example might be Buenos Aires. Everyone wants to be in Palermo, and it does cost more to be in Palermo, but maybe you could stay in this other area called Via Crespo that's bordering Palermo. It's still walking distance to Palermo, and it's still going to have all those amenities. It just doesn't have that brand name. So just think about, maybe can I be in that number 2 area instead of the number 1 area, and just make sure that when you're in that number 2 or number 3 area, that you're still going to be near a gym or a co-working space or whatever is important to you. Okay? So that's really my number 1 tip for reducing your costs in Latin America, is pay attention to rent, pay attention to how much you're paying for accommodation. Don't skimp out in order to be in the middle of nowhere. You still want to be in a place with a good walk score, as they call it, with good walkability and amenities nearby. But maybe instead of being in the number 1 area, you could be in the number 2 area. Or maybe you could spend a little bit more time researching or sending requests on Airbnb for discounts and negotiating with landlords, or any number of ways to save money. This video isn't exactly about exhausting every possible way to make money, to save money on rent, but this video is really just to make you think about how the number 1 variable that you need to control for is rent, and basically paying as low of rent as possible while still maximizing your experience.